The scream wasn't hers. It ripped through the sterile silence of Sarah Henderson's memory, jolting her awake in the pre-dawn gloom of her one-bedroom apartment. Sweat plastered her worn t-shirt to her back, cold despite the June warmth seeping through the window. Not her scream. Theirs. The collective gasp of nurses frozen in the hallway, the choked cry of the orderly dropping the stainless steel tray with a clatter that still echoed in her nightmares. The sound of her own body hitting the unforgiving linoleum, a sickening hollow thud, played on a loop, punctuated by the sharp, blinding agony that had fractured her life into before and after. Before, Sarah Henderson, 38, moderately successful freelance graphic designer, owner of a slightly creaky but reliable Honda Civic, lover of strong coffee and complicated jigsaw puzzles, possessor of 2 functioning legs. After, Sarah Henderson, 38, unemployed, client deadlines and crutches don't mix, owner of a mountain of medical debt that dwarfed her meager savings, reliant on a temperamental bus system, and connoisseur of chronic grinding pain. Possessor of 1 functional leg and 1 titanium-reinforced liability that throbbed with every step, every change in weather, every damn memory. And the memories were the worst. It hadn't been a dramatic accident. A patch of black ice on an otherwise mundane Tuesday morning grocery run. A slip, a fall, a crack that resonated up her femur with terrifying clarity. The ambulance ride to St. Jude Mercy Hospital was a blur of pain and shock. The triage nurse had been brisk, efficient, dismissive. Just a fall. We've got criticals coming in, honey. Sit tight. Sarah had sat tight for 3 agonizing hours, her legs screaming, her fear mounting, while the bustling indifference of the ER swirled around her. Admission brought no relief. Dr. Armitage, the orthopedic surgeon on call, had the bedside manner of a glacier. His pronouncement, complex fracture femur neck, needs ORIF surgery, soon, was delivered with the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. His eyes never quite met hers. Nurses were harried, overworked, their smiles brittle, their touch impersonal. Requests for pain medication were met with sighs and delays. Explanations were terse, incomplete. She felt like a malfunctioning appliance dumped on a repair shop counter, not a terrified woman whose life was crumbling. The surgery itself was a success, technically. The titanium plate and screws were expertly placed. But the care, the human part, abysmal. Post-op, doped on morphine, she'd overheard 2 nurses gossiping outside her door. Dr. Armitage is pissed, got held up in admin, missed his tea time. This one, a dismissive snort Sarah knew was aimed at her, wasn't supposed to take so long, messed up his whole afternoon. Recovery was a gauntlet of neglect, spilled bedpans left for hours, call buttons ignored. Physical therapy appointments missed because no one came to transport her. The crushing loneliness of being utterly dependent on people who seemed to view her as an inconvenience. The worst moment came during a dressing change. A young nurse, flustered and rushing, yanked the bandage with brutal force, tearing at the fresh, tender skin around the incision. Sarah cried out. The nurse rolled her eyes. Hold still. You're not the only patient, you know. The raw, burning pain was eclipsed only by the humiliation, the dehumanization. She complained, formally, to the charge nurse, to the patient advocate, a weary-looking woman named Brenda who took notes but whose eyes glazed over halfway through Sarah's account. We'll look into it, Ms. Henderson. Staffing is very challenging right now. Nothing changed. Dr. Armitage, during his 1-minute flyby visit, dismissed her concerns about the pain management delays and the bandage incident as minor hiccups. Focus on healing, he'd said, already turning to leave. The body is resilient. But the spirit, Sarah's spirit felt shattered. The hospital discharged her as soon as the insurance stopped authorizing days, sending her home with inadequate instructions and a prescription for painkillers she couldn't afford. The physical therapy they promised? Understaffed, overbooked, ineffective. Her recovery stalled. The freelance work dried up. She couldn't concentrate through the pain and the fog of cheap, over-the-counter substitutes for the medication she needed. Savings evaporated. The Honda Civic was sold. Bitterness, a dark, viscous thing, seeped into every corner of her existence. St. Jude Mercy hadn't just broken her leg, they'd broken her life. And they didn't care, not one bit. The revenge fantasy started small. Keying Dr. Armitage's luxury sedan, gleaming in the physician's lot, visible from her window during her stay, sending anonymous complaints to the medical board. But it felt petty, insufficient. She wanted them to feel it. The helplessness, the institutional indifference, the slow, grinding erosion of everything they took for granted. She wanted justice, not vandalism. And it needed to be sweet. So sweet it would stick in their throats. The idea came during another sleepless night, the phantom ache in her leg a constant companion. She was staring blankly at her old laptop, a relic from her design days. A news article popped up. Hospital system fined $2 million for billing fraud. The details were dry, bureaucratic, but the concept ignited something cold and fierce within her. Fraud, paperwork, systems. That was St. Jude Mercy's language. That was their vulnerability. Not brute force, but precision. A scalpel, not a sledgehammer. Could she? Sarah Henderson, graphic designer, crippled by debt and pain. Could she infiltrate the very machine that had chewed her up and spat her out? The audacity was terrifying and exhilarating. Her first target wasn't the hospital itself, but her own recovery. She became a model patient for the overwhelmed, underfunded outpatient physical therapist. She smiled through the pain, asked intelligent questions, followed every instruction meticulously. She needed to be mobile, capable. She needed resources. She also needed a new identity. Not literally, but digitally. A persona. She spent months in the musty quiet of the public library, avoiding the prying eyes of her few remaining acquaintances. She devoured books on hospital administration, medical billing codes, CPT, ICD-10, they became her new alphabet, HIPAA regulations, especially the loopholes, and cybersecurity basics. She learned about credentialing, privileging, audits. She discovered the Byzantine world of third-party medical transcription and billing services that hospitals relied on. She practiced typing until her fingers flew silently over the keys, her old design skills translating into an unnerving accuracy with data entry. She learned about virtual private networks, VPNs, proxy servers, and the dark corners of the internet where digital identities could be. Acquired. She wasn't becoming a hacker, not really. She was becoming a ghost in the machine, a phantom administrator. Her savings, what little was left, went towards a powerful, second-hand laptop and a secure, anonymous internet setup. She sold her grandmother's cameo brooch, the last thing of value she owned, for seed money. Every dollar was an offering to the altar of her revenge. The pain in her leg became a metronome, ticking off the hours of relentless study and preparation. For every ignored call button, for every condescending glance, for every tear shed into that thin hospital pillow, the persona emerged, Eleanor Vance. Mid-50s, impeccably credentialed on paper, forged meticulously, using fragments of real but dormant licenses and certifications Sarah uncovered through relentless online digging. With decades of experience in hospital revenue cycle management, Eleanor was calm, efficient, unflappable. She specialized in auditing and optimizing billing processes for underperforming departments. She worked remotely, exclusively. Her references, carefully crafted email addresses, and phone numbers Sarah controlled, sang her praises. Discreetly, of course. Eleanor Vance was a solution, a ghost who fixed problems hospitals didn't want aired publicly. Getting Eleanor Vance a foot in the door at St. Jude Mercy required patience and a deep understanding of institutional pain points. Sarah, as herself, was nothing. Eleanor Vance was invaluable. Sarah spent weeks studying St. Jude's public financial disclosures, news articles, even anonymous employee reviews on job sites. She learned about their recent struggles, budget cuts, a failed merger attempt, rumored layoffs in administrative staff, and whispers of an upcoming external audit by their major insurance provider, MedStar United. Cash flow was tight. Denials on claims were up. Their billing department, according to disgruntled forum posts, was drowning in outdated software and staff turnover. Sarah crafted her approach like a designer crafting a perfect layout. She targeted Michael Rostov, the beleaguered chief financial officer. His LinkedIn profile screamed stress. His public statements were defensive. She sent an email from Eleanor Vance's pristine professional account. Subject: Potential Revenue Recovery Opportunity, St. Jude Mercy Hospital. Dear Mr. Rostov, my name is Eleanor Vance, Principal Consultant at Vance Revenue Solutions. I specialize in identifying and rectifying systemic inefficiencies within hospital billing and coding operations, specifically those leading to revenue leakage and increased claim denials. Reviewing publicly available data and industry benchmarks, I've identified patterns suggesting St. Jude Mercy may be experiencing significant recoverable revenue loss, potentially in the range of 7-12 annually, specifically within certain surgical departments, OB/GYN, orthopedics, cardiology. This often stems from subtle coding errors, missed modifiers, and inadequate documentation capture, issues easily overlooked internally but flagged aggressively by payers like MedStar United. Given the upcoming MedStar audit cycle I understand you are facing, preemptive correction of these patterns could significantly mitigate financial penalties and optimize reimbursement. My approach is discreet, results-oriented, and fee-contingent, based solely on recovered revenue identified. I would welcome a brief, confidential discussion at your convenience to explore whether my analysis aligns with your internal observations and if Vance Revenue Solutions can be of assistance. Sincerely, Eleanor Vance, Principal Consultant, Vance Revenue Solutions. She attached a sleek, professional-looking one-pager outlining, in very broad, non-actionable terms, common revenue leakage points. It was bait, irresistible bait to a drowning CFO facing an audit. The reply came faster than she expected. Rostov's assistant scheduled a Zoom call for the following week. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The first step onto enemy territory. The call was a masterpiece of performance. Sarah, transformed into Eleanor Vance, used a sophisticated voice modulator she'd acquired, giving her a calm, slightly husky, middle-aged timbre and a blurred background. She wore a severe blouse and jacket, her hair pinned back tightly, glasses perched low on her nose, the image of quiet competence. She spoke fluently in the language of DRGs, HCCs, Modifier 22, and denials management. She referenced St. Jude's specific payer mix and MedStar's notorious auditing tactics with unnerving accuracy, information gleaned from months of research. She projected serene confidence. Rostov, appearing harried on screen, was initially skeptical but increasingly intrigued. The mention of orthopedics made him lean forward slightly. Dr. Armitage's department was notoriously expensive and, Rostov hinted carefully, sometimes less than meticulous with their documentation. Precisely the area where significant recoverables often hide, Mr. Rostov, Eleanor Vance said smoothly. A focused, deep-dive audit of surgical coding and documentation, particularly for complex procedures, can yield substantial returns, especially before an external auditor like MedStar picks it apart. The fee contingent offer sealed the deal. No upfront cost. Vance Solutions got 15 of any recovered revenue she identified within a 90-day engagement. Rostov, desperate for a win and with nothing to lose financially, agreed. A contract, drafted by Sarah using online templates and careful legalese, was signed electronically. Eleanor Vance was granted limited, audited access to St. Jude Mercy's billing and coding systems via a secure VPN connection. Sarah Henderson, hunched over her laptop in her dim apartment, her leg throbbing, had just infiltrated the belly of the beast. The first weeks were grueling. Eleanor Vance worked methodical, legitimate hours. She audited charts. She ran reports. She identified genuine, correctable coding errors, undercoded procedures, missed complexities, insufficient documentation to support billed services. She compiled neat reports for Rostov, highlighting recoverable revenue. Small victories designed to build trust. Rostov was delighted. Payments started trickling in from insurers based on her corrected claims. Her 15 started replenishing Sarah's coffers, fueling the next phase. But Sarah's real work happened in the shadows. During the hours, Eleanor wasn't officially working. She explored the system's architecture with the precision of a surgeon. She mapped user permissions. She identified weaknesses, shared logins, outdated software with known vulnerabilities, overworked IT staff drowning in tickets. She found the back doors, the forgotten pathways. She wasn't stealing data. She was learning the castle's secret passages. Her primary target crystallized, Dr. Philip Armitage. But not just him. The system that protected him. The culture of arrogance and neglect. She needed a scandal that would unravel from within. She discovered gold in the hospital's internal communications archive. Buried beneath layers of mundane emails, she found threads discussing Dr. Armitage. Complaints from nurses about his brusqueness. Concerns from anesthesiologists about him rushing complex surgeries. But more damningly, emails between Armitage and the chief medical officer discussing patients in dismissive, sometimes shockingly unprofessional terms. One email chain referenced Sarah Henderson by her patient ID number. Femur neck fracture, ORIF. Complicated by patient non-compliance and low pain threshold. Expect prolonged recovery, difficult IPT. Non-compliance? She'd begged for help. Low pain threshold. She'd been denied adequate medication. The lies, the casual character assassination, burned white hot. But she needed more. Tangible fraud. Something that would bring down not just Armitage, but expose the systemic rot. She focused on his billing. Eleanor Vance's legitimate audit provided perfect cover. She dove deep into Armitage's surgical cases. And there it was. A pattern. Subtle at first, then glaring. He was systematically upcoding. A straightforward knee replacement, CPT 27447, miraculously became a complex revision, 27487, far more frequently than his peers. A carpal tunnel release, 64721, was often billed as requiring extensive neurolysis, 64727. The documentation she saw was artfully vague, using buzzwords that implied complexity without explicitly stating it, relying on busy coders and lax internal audits to let it slide. He was padding his already substantial income, billing insurers for complexity that didn't exist. The hospital benefited from the higher reimbursements, turning a blind eye. Sarah documented everything meticulously: screenshots, copied files, archived emails. She stored them in multiple encrypted offline locations. This was the dynamite, but she needed the perfect detonator. Just exposing Armitage felt insufficient. The hospital would sacrifice him, maybe pay a fine and carry on. She needed them to implode. The upcoming MedStar United audit was her opportunity. MedStar was notoriously aggressive, looking for any reason to deny claims and recoup payments. Sarah, as Eleanor Vance, had Rostov's ear. She subtly amplified his fears about the audit. She suggested a comprehensive internal pre-audit, focusing specifically on high-risk areas like orthopedics to get ahead of any potential issues. Rostov, terrified of multi-million-dollar clawbacks, readily agreed, giving Eleanor even broader access. Now came the truly dangerous part. Sarah couldn't just hand MedStar the evidence. That might be traced back to Eleanor Vance. She needed MedStar to find it themselves, believing it was their own brilliant discovery. She needed to plant the seeds and let St. Jude's own arrogance and neglect cultivate the disaster. Using her deep access and knowledge of the system's vulnerabilities, she created a digital breadcrumb trail. She didn't alter any core records. Instead, she manipulated access logs and backup files, areas often neglected in routine audits, but scrutinized heavily during fraud investigations. She made it appear that certain questionable Armitage charts had been accessed and potentially modified by senior administrative personnel after the initial billing, specifically in the weeks leading up to the MedStar audit announcement. She planted fragments of the damning internal emails discussing patients, including herself, within temporary system caches, knowing sophisticated audit software might scrape them. She carefully inflated the statistical anomalies in Armitage's billing data within certain report templates, making the upcoding pattern scream for attention to anyone running deep analytics, which MedStar certainly would. It was intricate, nerve-wracking work. Every keystroke was a potential landmine. She worked in short, intense bursts, using multiple layers of anonymization, her hands steady despite the cold sweat on her brow. She was setting a fire, carefully arranging the kindling and ensuring the hospital's own negligence would provide the spark and the wind. The MedStar auditors arrived. A team of unsmiling accountants and clinical reviewers descended upon St. Jude Mercy. Rostov was a ball of nervous energy, constantly checking in with Eleanor Vance for reassurance. She provided it calmly, feeding him tidbits of the legitimate corrections she was making, while silently counting down. It took the MedStar team 3 weeks. Sarah monitored hospital chatter through carefully placed digital listeners, alerts on certain file accesses and keyword triggers within the internal network. The tension within the administration building was palpable, even through the digital ether. Whispers of discrepancies, serious irregularities, and Armitage started circulating. Then the hammer fell. MedStar issued a preliminary finding of systemic intentional upcoding and documentation fraud, specifically within the orthopedics department, with Dr. Armitage named as the primary perpetrator. They cited statistical anomalies, suspicious documentation patterns, and, crucially, evidence suggesting administrative collusion and attempts to alter records pre-audit. They froze millions in pending payments and demanded immediate restitution for past claims, threatening decertification. Chaos erupted at St. Jude Mercy. Rostov was fired instantly. The chief medical officer resigned to pursue other opportunities before he could be pushed. Dr. Armitage was suspended, his medical license under immediate review by the State Board, facing potential criminal charges. News vans camped outside the hospital. Headlines screamed, "Prestigious hospital rocked by billing fraud scandal." Surgeon accused of ripping off insurers, patients. Sarah watched it unfold from her apartment, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating her face in the darkness. News websites, local TV streams. She saw Dr. Armitage, pale and grim-faced, ducking into a car, besieged by reporters shouting questions about greed and patient harm. She saw the hospital's CEO, a woman Sarah remembered vaguely from a bland motivational poster in the lobby, giving a stilted press conference, promising full cooperation and rooting out corruption, her voice tight with panic. The facade of benevolent care crumbled, revealing the ugly machinery beneath. The sweetest moment came indirectly. Buried in a follow-up news article was a quote from a former patient, speaking anonymously due to fear of reprisal, detailing their own experience of neglect and dismissal at St. Jude Mercy, mirroring Sarah's ordeal almost exactly. The dam was breaking. Others were finding their voices. The institution was being held accountable, not just for fraud, but for its fundamental failure of care. Sarah didn't need to reveal herself as Eleanor Vance. Eleanor Vance simply completed her contract, submitting a final report to the interim CFO, Rostov's replacement, highlighting the legitimate recoveries she'd secured before the scandal broke. She invoiced for her 15 of those recoveries, a substantial sum that landed in her anonymous offshore account, courtesy of Eleanor Vance's meticulously constructed financial trail. Then Eleanor Vance vanished. The email address went dark. The phone number disconnected. Vance Revenue Solutions dissolved into the digital ether. Months passed. St. Jude Mercy settled with MedStar for an astronomical sum, avoiding decertification but left financially crippled and reputationally scarred. Dr. Armitage faced disciplinary hearings. His career was effectively over. Lawsuits from patients piled up. The state launched investigations into hospital management practices. The culture of neglect was finally under the microscope. Sarah Henderson used a fraction of Eleanor Vance's earnings to pay off her crushing medical debt. She invested in proper pain management and intensive physical therapy, finally gaining significant mobility. She bought a reliable used car. She didn't return to graphic design. Instead, using her newfound expertise and a carefully laundered portion of the funds, she quietly started a small, legitimate consultancy. She advised patient advocacy groups on navigating hospital systems and understanding medical billing. She helped others find their voice. One crisp autumn afternoon, Sarah sat in a small, independent coffee shop downtown. Sunlight streamed through the window, warm on her face. Her leg ached, a familiar throb, but it was manageable. She savored her coffee, strong, black, with 1 sugar. Sweet. On the counter, a discarded newspaper showed a grainy picture of Philip Armitage leaving a disciplinary hearing, head bowed. A young woman at the next table was frantically trying to soothe a crying baby while juggling her own coffee. She looked exhausted, overwhelmed. Sarah caught her eye and offered a small, understanding smile. Rough morning. The woman sighed, near tears. Just came from St. Jude's. Waited 2 hours for a 5-minute checkup. Felt like nobody even saw us. Sarah nodded slowly. She took a long, deliberate sip of her coffee, the warmth spreading through her. The bitterness was gone, replaced by a quiet, hard-won satisfaction. The road to healing was long, for her leg and for the system. But the first, crucial step had been taken. Justice, she thought, watching the young mother finally get the baby settled, could indeed be served cold. But sometimes it tasted remarkably sweet. She lifted her cup slightly, a silent toast to the ruins of St. Jude Mercy and to the future she was slowly, painstakingly rebuilding. One sip at a time,